Hi, this is Tim from Morial Radio and Morial TV, live with James Jacob Prash, who is in Vancouver, British Columbia. But this, right now, is This Week in Prophecy.
Blessings from Canada, dear friends, and greetings in Jesus. Hope you can watch us later with John Haller. In the meanwhile, This Week in Prophecy, and quite a week it has been. Quite a week indeed. At Georgetown University, a Jesuit institution in the United States, along with Notre Dame, one of the two most prominent Roman Catholic institutions of higher learning in the United States, we have the Saudi-funded Al-Wad bin Talal Center for Muslim and Christian Understanding. Now, right away, show me a Center for Christian Muslim Understanding in Saudi Arabia. They can't. It wouldn't be allowed. Right off the bat, it's completely hypocritical, and this Jesuit institution is, of course, party to it. At this Jesuit institution, we have a professor, Jonathan Brown. Jonathan Brown, however, is the son-in-law of the Saeed al-Aryan, a convicted terrorist. And he is a spokesman and advocate for this center funded from Saudi Arabia, the Al-Wad bin Talal Center for Muslim and Christian Understanding. They want Christians to understand what Muslims are saying. They don't want Muslims to understand the message of Jesus.
I want to welcome you all to a very special program. Many of you already know our speaker. You've also should all have a biography of our speaker. But as is obvious, if you just go up on the internet, you can find out almost everything you want to know or hear many of his talks. You can find those on the internet as well. Muhammad Tahir al-Qudri is a very well-known scholar, not only in Pakistan, but throughout the Muslim world, and increasingly in recent years in the West. He's had a very distinguished career studying both law and Islamic studies, was a professor and head of the department at the Punjab University, and is the founder of Minhaj al-Quran. He is a prolific author. We were just talking. He has some 450 books published out of 1,000 that he's finished. And so I'm hoping after this to convince him to put my name on some of those books so we can be co-authors. Since he's already written them, it sounds pretty good to me. In any case, but as many of you know, he, as it were, shot to even more international prominence with a major fatwa that he gave, running to something like 600 pages, addressing some of the key issues that we obviously face today internationally, in particular the issue of extremism and terrorism and its relationship or lack of relationship to Islam. What we propose to do today is to have a talk and then to have a question period. When it's time for questions, if you would go to the microphone and please identify yourself, and then you can ask a question. Questions are preferred to long statements because it's basically his party and not yours. So for those of you who want to say something, let's try to keep it brief so that we can benefit as much as we can from having this distinguished scholar and religious leader with us. Please.
نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Respectable audience, honorable ladies and gentlemen, I am really honored, I feel honored, and I am delighted by being with you this afternoon.
It was propagated as a reformist gradualist institution or organization to foster social change. The main spokesman at this conference this week in prophecy was Amr Darag. Amr Darag. What they won't tell you is that Amr Darag is a spokesman or a kingpin, an advocate of the Muslim Brotherhood, which basically is the political arm of the terrorist organization Hamas. Hamas is the military arm of the political organization, the Muslim Brotherhood. This reformist, gradualist organization for social change is the very one who, as the Muslim Brotherhood, in its guise as Muslim Brotherhood, was responsible for the assassination of Anwar Sadat, for making peace with the Israelis. Well, complete hypocrisy, complete dual standards. There is nothing peaceful or tolerant about the Muslim Brotherhood. Thank God, despite the efforts of Barack Obama to see the Muslim Brotherhood control Egypt, General Assisi rescued Egypt and rescued Western interest in American foreign policy and the security of Israel from the Muslim Brotherhood. Nonetheless, their advocate, Amir Darag, was the speaker, and he misrepresented it as a kind of Islamic Fabian organization that believes in gradualism as a tactic for social change. There is nothing gradualistic about political assassination and terror, of which the Muslim Brotherhood has been continually associated through its front group, Hamas. But to see this Georgetown professor at a Jesuit university in Washington, D.C., funded from Saudi Arabia, well, the Saudi Arabians will now allow no such institution to explain Christianity in Saudi Arabia, says all that needs to be said. It says all that needs to be said about Georgetown University. It says all that needs to be said about the Jesuits and about Roman Catholicism generally. It says all that needs to be said about Prince Arwad bin Talal al Saud. It says all that needs to be said about the Wahhabist House of Saud. It says all that needs to be said about Saudi Arabian foreign and domestic policy. It says all that needs to be said about Professor Jonathan Brown. But there's more. In one speech, Brown defended slavery within Islam. He defended slavery within Islam. Yet, he's featured at Georgetown University this week in prophecy. This week in prophecy, it was disclosed that Russia hacked the email of a contractor.
On Thursday, the Wall Street Journal reported that the NSA is facing questions over its ability to safeguard the country's most powerful surveillance tools after Russian government hackers stole classified NSA codes from a contractor. 2 other contractors have also been arrested for leaking classified materials from the agency. Senator Ben Sasse said that the NSA needs to get its head out of the sand and solve its contractor problem. He continued to say that Russia is a clear adversary in cyberspace and we can't afford these self-inflicted injuries.
Who downloaded highly classified information onto his personal computer. So although the Russians were not able to get into the NSA's data system, they were able to get into the data system of an outside contractor who illegally made a copy of highly classified information onto his own computer. And they did this using a widely available commercial website. It was quite easy. The information that was hacked by the Russians, however, was information showing how the NSA gets into secure Russian systems. This has resulted in obfuscating the intelligence capacity of the NSA to get into foreign intelligence systems databases and it has obviously resulted in a major national security breach for the United States in terms of cybersecurity. We don't have that same guaranteed access anymore. Not only that, but it shows them how to access us because of one person. His name is not released. We don't know if he's being prosecuted, but we see the real intentions of Mr. Putin and what is going on. And we see that the Cold War has not ended in the thinking of the American intelligence community or of the Russians. In fact, it is being revived this week in prophecy. This week in prophecy, there had been an Islamic terror attack in Edmonton, here in Canada.
Carnage on the streets of Canada overnight after the stabbing of a police officer in a high-speed chase that left several people injured.
Yeah, the attack now being investigated as an act of terror after police found an ISIS flag on scene.
Yeah, in the car apparently. Ellison Barber is live in Washington, D.C. with the very latest on this. Ellison, what are you hearing?
That's right. The one thing that really suggests terrorism here, according to police, is an ISIS flag found at the first scene. The attack allegedly started outside of a Canadian football game Saturday night. The Edmonton Eskimos were playing, and police say an officer was standing in front of a traffic barricade when a Chevy Malibu came speeding down the road, hitting the officer and sending him flying in the air. Here's the Edmonton police chief earlier today.
A male, believed to be 30 years old, then jumped out of his vehicle and viciously attacked the Edmonton Police Service member with a knife. A struggle then ensued, during which the male suspect stabbed the officer several times before fleeing the scene on foot, northbound, down 92nd Street. Because of the officer's injuries, he was transported to hospital.
The officer was taken to a hospital, as you heard him say there, and police say they sent out an alert to other officers with the name of the person that Chevy Malibu was registered to. Later that night, Edmonton police say officers were working at a traffic checkpoint. They stopped a U-Haul and asked for ID.
The officer recognized the name as being very similar to the registered owner of the Chevy Malibu. The U-Haul truck immediately fled the scene and was pursued by police officers towards downtown Edmonton. Throughout the chase, the truck deliberately attempted to hit pedestrians in crosswalks.
The suspect hit at least 4 people. Police say the 2 attacks are related and now being investigated as terrorism. According to the Edmonton police chief, they found one piece of evidence in the front seat of the Chevy Malibu, an ISIS flag. They say the driver is known to police. He's a 30-year-old man. Right now, according to the chief, they believe he acted alone, but at this point aren't ruling others out. The police officer stabbed is expected to survive. The condition of the injured pedestrian, those at least 4 who were hit by the U-Haul, is unknown. Abby, Pete, Todd.
All right, Ellison, you'll keep a close eye on this one. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ellison. Thanks, Ellison.
Another Islamic terrorist attack. There have been others, including a gunman attempting to shoot up the Canadian National Parliament in Ottawa. Fortunately, he was shot dead by a Canadian policeman. Nonetheless, there's been another Islamic terrorist attack this week here in Edmonton. And in Edmonton this week, following that attack, an advocate of Islamic terror from Gaza is going to be performing a concert. Mohammed Asaf, who glamorizes hatred and terror, anti-Semitism, Jew hatred, encouraging violence, is going to be performing in Edmonton, Canada, several days after an Islamic terrorist attack. And his music glamorizes Islamic terror. The Canadian government, under Mr. Trudeau, seems to have lost its mind. It is almost as bad as Theresa May and the Mayor of London in Great Britain. This week in prophecy, Mohammed Asaf will also be performing in London. After the Islamic knife attacks in front of the Houses of Parliament, after the Islamic vehicle attacks on London Bridge, this celebrator of Islamic terror is being allowed to perform in London, England. But Theresa May's government does not ban him. And the Mayor of London has no problem with it. He's a Muslim who tells the West, get used to it, concerning Islamic terror. It is a world gone mad. We have warned repeatedly, if Western governments do not stand up to the reality of the radical Islamic threat and address the issue of Islamic immigration, that people, particularly working class people and others, are going to be forced to go to the extreme right. They're going to go to neo-Nazi parties, to the British National Party, etc., because those are the only ones who will stand up. The crooked Conservative Party in Britain under Theresa May, and of course the Labour Party, will do nothing. Canada is no better. People will go to the extreme right. In the United States, you have judges. After the Islamic attacks on homosexuals, killing 50 of them in Orlando, and the Islamic attacks in San Bernardino, because the Obama administration said you couldn't violate the rights of these radical Muslims by looking at their Facebook pages, committed these murders in San Bernardino when the Trump administration attempted to restrict Islamic immigration from these countries. Judges said you're violating their rights to come to America and kill Americans. Lawsuits were brought by left-wing state governments in Hawaii and elsewhere. Now, in a sane world, these judges would be held for treason. They'd be impeached for unconstitutional activity. It is the government, the administration, that is called to protect the borders and control immigration, not corrupt judges with a left-wing agenda who say we shouldn't violate the rights of radical Muslims to come here and kill us. Again, a world gone mad. But the threat is not just against Christians and Jews. This week in prophecy, we have seen it is also against moderate Muslims. While Linda Saucer, who describes herself as an Islamic feminist, yet defends the Saudi mistreatment of women because she's funded, an organization called Muslim Girls has been putting out true information on its website, muslimgirl.com. And they have provided substantial documentation showing that fundamentalist Islam is anti-black, subjugating of blacks. Remember, in countries like Niger, where 3 American Green Berets were killed this week, also in Mauritania, also in Sudan, and also in Chad, Muslims owned black African slaves in the 21st century. Again, Professor Jonathan Brown at Georgetown defended this, and Linda Saucer seems to have no problem with it. But the Islamic Society of North America has published statements that if a right-wing organization published them would have been denounced as racist, and rightly so. Imam Siraj Wahaj said no blacks were allowed at this conference to speak. They advocate the subjugation of blacks. And they are outspokenly anti-homosexual. Now, I don't agree with homosexuality. Sorry. I do not agree with homosexuality. But these people are against homosexuals personally, yet the left says nothing about this organization, the Islamic Society of North America, or Linda's. Not only that, but Siraj Wahaj was a witness in the trial of the blind sheikh, responsible for the original terrorist attacks in New York in 1996 on the World Trade Center that were the precursor of September 11th, that the Clinton and Bush administrations allowed to happen by refusing to crack down on Islamic terror after we had the first warning. Bush did this, of course, because his administration was owned and operated by the Saudi Arabians. Clinton, of course, was funded from the Persian Gulf. And if the multiple accounts are to be believed, and there's no evidence that they're not true, the evidence supports they are true, Osama bin Laden was offered to the American government by the government of Sudan, and Clinton turned the deal down, allowing September 11th to happen. Nonetheless, let's continue. This week in prophecy. It is amazing how MuslimGirl.com and other moderate Muslims, with whom we have no contention, are telling the truth about radical Islam, yet the left will say nothing about radical Islam. In fact, they will attack those who do. But we've seen it this week in prophecy in Georgetown University, and we've seen it this week in prophecy with the Islamic Society of North America. We've seen it this week in prophecy again in London with Theresa May's government, and we've seen it this week in prophecy in Canada with Trudeau's government. We again emphasize our argument is not against moderate Muslims who want to live peaceably in the West. Our argument is against the apologists for radical Islam, like at Georgetown University with Professor Jonathan Brown and with Linda Saucer, and with the hypocrisy of the mainstream media like CNN, the BBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the network news organizations for saying nothing. Our argument is also with Western governments, from the Bush administration to the Clinton administration to the Obama administration to the Trudeau government in Canada to Theresa May and David Cameron's regimes in Britain and Canada. It's the same old story. But we see it coming into full focus and play once more this week in prophecy. The true colors of the Church of England have once again been publicly displayed in England, in London, the center of London. St. Andrew's, Holborn, had a satanic fashion show.
It was reported Fright Night, models made up like skeletons and vampires don nightmare-inspired outfits as they take to the catwalk for London Fashion Week. Dilara Findikoglu, I think is how you pronounce it, pushed the boundaries with her hair-raising designs at London Fashion Week. Her bizarre range of clothing on the runway in a Catholic church, St. Andrew's, had satanic influence with a punk rock twist. Models wore horns, capes, and latex. And I mean, you look at this and it is out of control, guys. We've been talking about trying to normalize Satanism for a long time, right? But this is just a whole new level. We saw the Gothard Tunnel ceremonies last summer, and that was pretty blatant, but this is a whole new level, folks. Check this out. You have the Tim Burton look here, the Nightmare Before Christmas style, and then I'll get into the background here in a minute. Here we have a sigil, literally, on the forehead, which the Vigilant Citizen pointed out as the sigil of Lucifer, or the seal of Satan. And then, I mean, come on, guys. Like, seriously, how is this even, like, not, I don't know. I don't get how people don't see how blatant this is becoming. Okay, so here you have a vampire-style, heavy-set Dracula look-alike with a mark on the forehead. A few more here with the upside-down crosses. The punk-style era with the Sex Pistols influence. And this is that scene that is just so blatant. You have the two pillars here, the hexagram in the middle, the all-seeing eye everywhere, the black and white checkered floor. And look at all these kids here on the side looking at this thinking, oh my gosh, I'm at this prestigious, cool event with no idea as to what is being displayed right in front of them. You also have the infinity symbol here that is actually the Ouroboros in the infinity symbol, because you have the snake eating its own tail. You have the G with the 5-pointed star for the Freemasons. I mean, it's all here. It's right in front of you. And can you believe that this is held in a church? St. Andrew's? Well, it's a Catholic church, so it shouldn't be too surprising at all. This is actually probably more in line with the reality of the Catholic Church and their religion. where it's literally, on the front, it's like, oh yeah, they're peddling Jesus Christ and Christianity. And that's kind of true. But underneath, this is a satanic organization. The spirit of Antichrist has always been with the Catholic Church and the Vatican and the papacy, especially. But this is a whole new level, and they're trying to normalize this stuff because it's about to happen, I think, in terms of a huge exposure of pedophilia and the pedophile elite, the satanic elite. They're one and the same. It goes back to Thelema and the religion of Aleister Crowley, sex magic. And Aleister Crowley even said that some of the most powerful rituals are with sodomizing little boys, okay, and then killing them ritually. And he even had a hard time pulling through with it. I believe he didn't even actually do it. So this is just blatantly in your face, guys. Here we have another one. I mean, come on, folks. You have the red, the scarlet red, which is a very important symbol in satanic worship. According to Thelemapedia, Babylon is referred to as the Scarlet Woman, the Great Mother, the Mother of Abominations, the Scarlet Whore, right? And she represents chaos, okay? And again, it's tied to Aleister Crowley. I mean, this is just in your face, blatant. And then you have the pentagram 5-pointed star painted on her face. I mean, it doesn't get more blatant than that. Here she is again. And with the whole Scarlet Woman thing, this is just one area. I mean, this has been displayed many, many times. Katy Perry has peddled the whole scarlet look, and several other celebrity types have all done this as part of their sort of thing that they have to do. The most memorable one, perhaps Lady Gaga in the red outfit where she's totally covered in red like this. This is a reference to the Thelemic Scarlet Woman of Babylon, the Whore of Babylon. And expect to see this, guys, in the upcoming Star Wars, as they have the Last Jedi Praetorian Guard as one of the characters that wears all red. And there's a few of them actually coming out that's, really being prominent here. Another dual elite Praetorian Guard action figure here, just outlining what we're about to see. More of the same stuff as what is being portrayed here, pushed out to the kids. So this is just a little glimpse of what's to come, even more than what we've already seen. Here's another one with, obviously, the all-seeing eye on one eye. It's pretty obvious and blatant, folks, where they're trying to take us. Not everyone's going to buy into this, but the people that are, those are the ones that are going to take the mark, that are going to worship the dragon, all the things that we've been talking about and warning about for years. Here's another one that's pretty disturbing here. I mean, come on, folks. You got the little horns, and we talked about the horns, right? Satanism going mainstream. And here you go, another one, the red, again, the scarlet red woman, this time with the larger horns. And this is just depravity. There's no other way to really describe this. I don't understand how this is art. This is just a crazy costume party that's getting a little too out of hand here. Here's another one with a single eye and, just the rebellious attitude, the mohawk, cool, punk rock vibe. So there you have it. I mean, it is so blatantly obvious now that it's quite sad that this kind of stuff is being peddled within a Catholic church in London. And this is no surprise, as the Vatican has always been part of the Antichrist spirit and really the satanic infiltration, to the point where they're really literally outwardly satanic now. And I just think it's crazy how deep the deception goes and how they're trying to normalize this sort of thinking. Because again, I think what we're going to see is a lot of people in governments, in institutions and everything else, even more people than you would imagine, start getting busted for pedophilia and, having satanic rituals and satanic ritual abuse and things like that. It's going to become even more widely known, and it's going to split people really down the middle, the wheat and the tares, right? It's going to become very, very obvious. And so I hope you guys share this with friends and family. This is being pushed out there, guys. This is like the future of fashion or whatever. It's not just, random stuff happening. They're allowing this kind of stuff to happen, and they're pushing it out there more and more. It's in your face. It's blatant. And the church needs to wake up to it, because right now the church doesn't have really an answer to this stuff. They just, ignore it or whatever. They just call it expression, or who knows. But We need to wake up. We need to realize what's going on.
The wardrobes on display were the designs of the Turkish designer Dilara Findikoglu. Now, why weren't they displayed in Erdogan's Turkey, a Sharia government, or even the Turkish government, which is going in the direction of Sharia, wouldn't allow it because it's openly satanic. But the Church of England did this week in prophecy, and quite a show it was. They had a transvestite in satanic drag. The apse of the church was decorated with satanic symbolism, pentagrams, goats' heads, and other demonic imagery. It was a tribute to Satanism at St. Andrew's, Holborn, Church of England. You know, as in St. Andrew's, Chorleywood, as in Holy Trinity, Brompton. How can anybody who is a saved Christian remain part of a church that is a part of that wicked, evil denomination? For decades now, decades, St. James Piccadilly in the centre of London has been a haunt of demons. But now you have an open combination of homosexuality and Satanism being glorified in a Church of England. No, this is not the Church of England of William Tyndale. This is not the Church of England of the Oxford Martyrs, of Ridley, Latimer, or Hooper. This is not the Church of England of J.C. Ryle, but it is the Church of England of Sandy Miller. It is the Church of England of the Alpha Course. It is the Church of England of Nicky Gumbel and of the other so-called Anglican believers who are compromising with something that is openly satanic. Just as they kept their mouths shut about the first homosexual and lesbian clergy celebration in Southwark Cathedral when George Carey, a former evangelical, was Archbishop of Canterbury. How can any saved Christian be a part of the Church of England? I do not know. Once again, come out of her, my people, that you may not participate in her sins and share in her plagues. If you are in it, you are participating in her sins. You are financially supporting that institution that through its diocesan funding is subsidizing the salaries of vicars who don't believe in Christ scripturally, who are self-professed homosexuals, etc., etc. If you don't agree with it, why are you picking up the bill for it? But they don't care. The whole synod is a compromised system of hypocrisy. Good God Almighty. Transvestite satanic drag. The purpose of this fashion show in the church was, quote unquote, a tribute to Satan. The left devours itself. Harvey Weinstein, the left-wing film producer.
Congressional Democrats are backing away from one of their big donors, Hollywood heavyweight Harvey Weinstein, as new details emerge over allegations of sexual harassment by the Hollywood producer. Correspondent Anita Vogel reports from Los Angeles.
He's the man behind some of Hollywood's biggest hits.
Shakespeare!
And his money has been behind some of the country's top Democratic politicians. Now, those on the left are scrambling to distance themselves from mega producer Harvey Weinstein after the prominent Democratic donor was accused of sexually harassing employees and well-known actresses over decades.
Many Democrats who've received this money consider it tainted money, and for obvious reasons.
Over the years, Weinstein has cozied up to the likes of of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama giving more than $70,000 to Obama's 2012 campaign and victory fund, according to OpenSecrets.org, while Clinton and the Hillary Victory Fund received more than $35 grand. Political analysts say it's not possible to vet every single donation, but with this revelation, the ball is now in their court.
Regardless of what she knew and what she knew when, she has two routes. She can do nothing, or she can do something with the equivalent amount of money that Harvey Weinstein had given her.
Top Democratic senators like possible 2020 White House contender Elizabeth Warren, as well as Patrick Leahy and Richard Blumenthal, already announced they would donate the money Weinstein gave them to charity.
Shuttling that money away, getting rid of it, getting it off their books is going to be something that, from a political standpoint, is going to be beneficial to them.
Last night, famed director and fellow Democratic donor Steven Spielberg tried to duck the controversy.
I have a lot of opinions about that, but not for this event tonight.
For his part, Weinstein says he came of age in the 60s and 70s when the culture in the workplace was different. In a statement, he says, quote, "I have since learned it's not an excuse in the office or out of it to anyone." And today, the Democratic National Committee says it condemns all forms of sexual harassment and will donate more than $30,000 in contributions it's received from Weinstein to women's charities. Brett?
Anita, thank you.
Has been disclosed to have made 8 out-of-court settlements for sexual harassment. He's threatening to sue the New York Times, claiming that there was inaccuracy in some of their reporting. But then he has the audacity to say it is a right-wing conspiracy against him to publish these things because of his large financial support for the Democratic Party, for Barack Obama, for Hillary Clinton, etc. It's a right-wing conspiracy. No, the New York Times is not right-wing. One of the women involved was the mega progressive feminist, Ashley Judd.
It's time for the Hollywood Walk of Shame, where we showcase the most appalling behavior of America's decadent celebrity class. When we were children, we were taught that it was nice to compliment people, but no more. Actress Ashley Judd complained for almost 2.5 minutes on Facebook after an airport worker called her a sweetheart.
I was coming through security and a guy said, "Hey, sweetheart," and I said, "I'm not your sweetheart, I am your client." So I was already setting a boundary. And then when I was setting my things out, he said, "Hey, nice dress." Guess what happened next? He touched me. I didn't see him touch anybody else. And I turned around and I said, that was unnecessary. By the time, my skin is burning, my feet are burning, it's so hard to continue to set these boundaries. Then for good measure, he just said one more time, "Have a good day, sweetheart." And this is the kind of thing to me that happens, which I categorize as everyday sexism.
Yeah, she's a sweetheart. North Korea said earlier today, "We will mercilessly wipe out provocateurs." And that's what Ashley Judd seems determined to do with airport workers. Radio host Dana Lash joins us. Dana, there's a lot to worry about in the world today, but this everyday sexism is the crisis afflicting us, according to Ashley Judd.
Yes, we have everyday lunacy, Mark, and it's so good to see you and be with you tonight. You said that what she whined about this for 2.5 minutes on Facebook. That's about 1 minute and 30 seconds longer than most attention spans for people who watch streaming videos online. Right. There's nothing wrong with somebody paid her a compliment. Can you imagine if someone would have paid her an insult? Now that would have been something to live stream about.
Yeah, I don't know what we're meant to do now, because if you can't say, "Oh, have you changed your hair? That's a very nice hairstyle." If you can't say, "That's a lovely outfit you're wearing today," the normal social ebb and flow becomes there's no courtship rituals, there's no social rituals, there's no possibility of human interaction ultimately.
I feel as though Mark's chivalry is under attack by third wave feminism. If a man opens a door anymore for a woman, he's lectured about it online. If he simply compliments a woman, he's lectured about it. They go out and with the media, they look up everything that they can about these individuals, which I'm surprised it hasn't been done for this particular airport employee. The media hasn't gone and dug everything up about him, and they try to ruin their lives over it. There's no sexism here.
No, and this is Ashley Judd, whose last appearance in public was when she did that poem, "I'm a Nasty Woman," the day after the inauguration.
Yeah.
Why isn't that actually more unpleasant than saying, "Hey, nice dress, sweetheart"?
Yeah, I found that cringeworthy. As a woman, I found that everyday lunacy. It was ridiculous, her behavior with that. No, if she really thinks that she has it hard, maybe she can ask women, Mark, in Saudi Arabia who aren't allowed to drive, or women in other Middle Eastern countries who don't even have representation in a court of law simply because they're female.
Yeah, that's a whole other. You say nice burqa or whatever, and then the guy's going to be taking the scimitar to you.
She's not right wing either. What an absurd claim! We have seen this absurdity before. Most recently, when the Southern Poverty Law Center condemned a feminist activist, a progressivist, because of her campaigning against forced female genital mutilation in the Islamic world, and they called her an Islamophobe. The absurdity of the left. Let these rats cannibalistically devour each other. Now it has finally reached Hollywood, and it's been a long time coming. It is most unfortunate that Harvey Weinstein, originally from New York, where I'm from, is Jewish. You have other Jews who are on the opposite end of the spectrum. Obviously, we have Mr. Shapiro, we have Mr. Savage, we have Mark Levin, we have Dennis Prager, various others. A disproportionate amount of people who are on the political right and who uphold traditional values are Jewish. But sadly and tragically, on the diametric opposite, those who are most adverse and involved in the financial support of the destruction of traditional Judeo-Christian values are also Jews. Just as there is a polarization in the church, we have to understand among God's ancient people, Israel, there's a polarization among the Jews. But that polarization will reach greater heights as more Jews come to faith in Jesus. The founder of Christians in Sport, Eddie Wax, Jewish. Louis Sheldon, who defends the rights of heterosexuals against homosexual militancy in San Francisco, Jewish. Jay Sekulow, the lawyer for Donald Trump and the legal founder and director of the American Council for Law and Justice, the alternative to the ACLU, believer in Jesus who is Jewish. Yes, the polarization is not only political, it will be spiritual and theological. Again, I ask prayers for people like Michael Savage, for David Horowitz, for Ben Shapiro. I really do. For Mark Levin, that these people will have their eyes open and see the truth about their Messiah, Yeshua. They're on the right road in what they're seeing is happening to society. And they're on the right road in understanding what is happening in the political realm. What they don't seem to get is it's what the Hebrew prophets predicted would happen in the last days. And it has to do with the coming of the Messiah, the second coming. But it went down, finally, the roosters came home to roost in Hollywood this week in prophecy. Good luck, Harvey Weinstein. the New York Times and Harvey Weinstein fighting with each other. He's calling it a right-wing conspiracy. That's absurd. Nonetheless, that's This Week in Prophecy. Let's continue This Week in Prophecy. After being financially pressured into a reconciliation with the Palestinian Authority under Mahmoud Abbas, Hamas appeared with him to make a public statement in terms of a display of unity. Now, this is politically charged. It is even divided in religious terms. Nonetheless, it's a public display. It's a facade. There is not a real unity as yet, but there's going to be one between Hamas and Abbas. It may functionally work up to a degree for a time, but the propensity is usually for them to either fall out or to go into conflict with Israel and then fall out. Mr. Abbas denounced the fighting that took place between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. Remember, they killed thousands of each other. Thousands. Perhaps 8,000 in Gaza. Far more than were ever killed by the Israelis in self-defense. And they killed many thousands of each other when they were in Lebanon. Palestinian Arab Muslim against Palestinian Arab Muslim. And they both have persecuted Arab Christians. The statistics of Palestinian Arab against Palestinian Arab in terms of death are astounding. Yet they have to divert away from those fatality figures by pointing to the Israelis. The Israelis killed 3 when they returned fire after Katyushas were fired at Sderot or something like that. That becomes the news. BBC and CNN will make sure that's the news. The Guardian newspaper will make sure that's the news. But when they exterminate thousands of each other, that's no issue. The biased journalism I've seen of reporters like Robert Fisk has been nothing less than disgusting, and I've actually seen journalists who blame the Israelis for the Palestinian Arab genocide against each other. Nonetheless, This Week in Prophecy, after this supposed display of unity, Abbas said there is no Palestinian Arab state in sight. Now, of course, he's not telling the truth. He's engaging in the usual revisionism. King Hussein of Jordan, Yasser Arafat, the British government, the League of Nations, and the United Nations all stated that Jordan is a Palestinian Arab Muslim state. He's speaking about having another one. But he admitted it's not in sight. But for this, he does not blame their own intransigence, or the fact that beginning with Ehud Barak, they were offered another Palestinian state. The usual revisionism of Mr. Abbas is to forget the words of Yasser Arafat and of King Hussein of Jordan, affirming that a Palestinian Arab state already exists. The usual rhetoric and the usual revisionism is all they want the people to hear instead of the actual historical and legal facts. He blames the Israelis. Once more, forgetting that beginning with Ehud Barak, and on 2 other occasions, they were offered a second Palestinian Arab Muslim state and a reasonable compromise on Jerusalem, and 3 times turned it down, responding instead with jihad, in the words of the late terrorist Yasser Arafat, when they were putting bombs at bus stops for school buses. I was in Jerusalem when a bomb went off on a bus ignited by a suicide bomber that killed 17 people. I'd been there 5 minutes sooner. I've seen what they do. It is unbelievable. And the hypocrisy is unbelievable. They blame the Israelis for not having a second state, ignoring the fact there's already one by their own admission. And expect the world, not just their own people, to ignore the fact that they turned one down 3 times in exchange for peace. This week in prophecy. The main news this week in prophecy, however, concerns the Iran agreement. The world has been diverted because of the shooting in Las Vegas, which we've already addressed. The hypocrisy of the media in handling this has again been ridiculously hypocritical. It's certainly been the hypocritical propaganda of the progressivists and the political left wing, that is the Democratic Party. The fact of the matter is, it is Barack Obama who has blood on his hands. It was the Barack Obama administration and the Eric Holder Justice Department who authorized as legal, the sale of bumper stock. These mechanisms that allow a semi-automatic weapon to fire as if they were an automatic weapon. That was Barack Obama's administration who declared this legal. It was not conservatives or Second Amendment rights activists. It was not the NRA. It was none of those people. It was Barack Obama who did it. He's the one with blood on his hands. But instead of talking to Eric Holder and Barack Obama or Loretta Lynch, as it was their administration who allowed these, they're again targeting the NRA, who doesn't approve or agree with bumper stop mechanisms. Unbelievable. And CNN just lies. MSNBC just lies. New York Times just lies. No wonder their circulation and viewership is always going down. Anybody who listens to a proven liar is either a liar themselves looking for lies to tell, or they're just an idiot. Barack Obama has blood on his hands over what happened in Las Vegas. It was his corrupt administration that allowed for bumper stock sales. It was not anything the NRA wanted. The NRA does not approve of it. It was not Second Amendment rights activists. It was not Republicans or conservatives or libertarians. It was Barack Obama. Why does CNN not ask him why? Why does the New York Times not say so? Why does MSNBC say nothing? Because they're hypocrites and liars. They don't report news. They editorialize it and spin it along the line of their biases. That has been This Week in Prophecy. And it all diverts attention from the real issues. Again, we've seen the aftermath of hurricane in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is in need of a Marshall Plan. But let's understand part of the reason for Puerto Rico's mess. The average Puerto Rican only makes about $15,000 a year salary. And food is more expensive in Puerto Rico than it is in the mainland United States, like Florida. Why is it so poor? Well, it's an island. Things have to be imported. Hawaii is an island, and everything in Hawaii, except for pineapple and sugar, comes from California or from Japan. It's the way it is. But if you think Puerto Rico is poor, don't look at Puerto Rico's neighbors like Cuba or the Dominican Republic or Haiti. Then you'll see what poor really is. As unfortunate as things are in Puerto Rico, it's not nearly as bad as it would be if it was not American. And most of the people in Puerto Rico realize this. Now, there is a problem there, and even before the horrific effects of the hurricane, even prior to that, it was in very serious economic trouble. But how could it not be? Just like Detroit, just like Baltimore, just like Philadelphia, just like St. Louis, San Juan, about the 14th largest American city, has a Democratic mayor. National Security Advisor Mr. McMasters is no friend of Israel. On the contrary, he's hostile to Israel. And although strategically competent, the Secretary of Defense, former General Mattis, is also no great friend of Israel. Either is Mr. Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State. None of them are. They have establishment Republican leanings. Certainly Mr. Tillerson and McMasters do. But McMasters has pro-Obama leanings. Yes, pro-Obama leanings. He wants President Trump to continue to approve, once again for the second time since being president, the continuation of this unratified agreement with Iran. German business interests and others just want to kick the can down the road, despite the fact that Iranian missile development will threaten Europe. This week in prophecy, Mr. Trump had a meeting with senior military commanders. All of what was said is not really known. But let's understand something. Despite what he said at the UN, and in large part because of the unfortunate toxic influences of McMasters, the Trump administration policies in Syria and Iraq suit Iran very well. Russia is working with Iran and Syria to keep Assad in power. While the Trump administration has been successful in bringing about the almost total destruction of the Barack Obama JV team known as ISIS, this was achieved in part by accommodating agreements with the Putin regime. Putin sustaining Assad in power and bringing in the Iranian military presence into Syria that will inevitably extend into Lebanon with Hezbollah and into northern Iraq. What good is it replacing ISIS with Iran? I pray to God that Mr. Trump fires McMasters and does not once again ratify or approve the continuation of this illegal treaty made by Barack Obama and John Kerry to the detriment of American interests, to the detriment of Israeli interests, to the detriment of the interests of even moderate Islamic countries in the region. But so far, it seems to be McMasters who's had Mr. Obama's policies going into the ear of President Trump. McMasters is not just an establishment Republican, he's an Obama Republican. He's a dangerous, dangerous man. We should pray to God the Lord removes him from the administration and destroys his influence. Not only that, but additionally, the Trump administration did not side with the Kurds in their nationalist ambitions. As I have said for years, the Kurds, the descendants of the ancient Medes, are the only Iraqis we can trust, other than the Christian Iraqis who've been driven out or killed. The Kurds are the only ones. Yet, in placation of Russia and Iran, Mr. Trump has not, in any sense, stood with the Kurds. Afraid of aggravating Turkey? Mr. Erdogan is no friend of America. He's a future enemy, unless he's dealt with. More than that, the Trump administration has sought to broker a peace between Saudi Arabia and the Emirates with Qatar. Qatar is in bed with Iran. Qatar has been supportive of terror. Qatar has been the home base of Al Jazeera. Qatar needs to be destroyed as a regime. Its government needs to be destroyed as a pro-terror regime. Even other Muslim Arabs know it. But McMaster's is on the side of Iranian interests. Once again, I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I voted against Hillary Clinton. That's why I voted for Donald Trump. Although I agreed with him on many things, and I was personally delighted to see somebody who could beat the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. Both of them are co-equally no good. His administration has in many ways been a disappointment. It has not moved the embassy to Jerusalem and giving place to people like McMaster's while getting rid of good people like Sebastian Gork and others is very troubling. His policies have been helpful to the interests of Russia and Assad and Iran. What good is it replacing ISIS with Iran? This leaves the Israelis to stand alone. In the eyes of the Israelis, if Mr. Trump will not eliminate the nuclear threat of North Korea, it means the United States cannot be relied upon to eliminate the coming nuclear threat of Iran, and the Israelis will have to act unilaterally. And they are strategically planning to do so. Again, there's a hope that Mr. Trump's actions will match his words, but unless this obstacle in the form of McMaster's is dealt with, I do not know if that will happen. As we said last week, Mr. Tillerson is no friend of Israel either. Please pray for President Trump and Mr. Pence. Please pray that they will keep their words, that their pronouncements will not be mere rhetoric, that they will realize the truth concerning Kurdistan and the Kurds, concerning Qatar, and concerning Putin. Replacing ISIS with Iran is a bad deal. And it puts the Israelis in a position that is very precarious, where they will have to stand up to Iran on their own. They'll have no choice. Now again, all of this with Putin, with the Turkish factor, with Iran, all of it converges to at least the semblance of a Gog and Magog scenario. I'm not saying this is it, but I'm saying it could become it. And it's this week in prophecy. My name is Jacob Pash, this week in Vancouver, Canada. Thank you so much for listening. God bless.
And of course, Jacob will be back next week with This Week in Prophecy live from England.